It's Monday, September 8th, 2025, and we are back with a brand new executive dashboard video series. This one with no slides or boring information where we get right into it. So I've created 11 megaregions in the United States and have aggregated the daily stock changes into those regions. And that's what we're seeing here in the map. Red is a loss for the day. Remember, this is Friday, the 5th of September. So if the S&P companies in the region had an overall loss in terms of market capitalization for the day, they appear towards the red side of the color spectrum. If they had a gain for the day, they appear towards the green side of the color spectrum there. So the Intermountain West region, there in the darkest green, is the biggest gainer for the day, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We'll take a look at each specific region in their specific dashboards, but these are the 11. And it kind of corresponds nicely with the 11 S&P 500 sectors that we have, and that's what we're looking through here is the total S&P 500 market index by capitalization, by sector. IT's the biggest, followed by financials. So here's the daily update dashboard. Familiar with this if you watched the last video series, but we can look at the biggest gainers and losers for the day, look at the percent change, the share price change, gainers on the right, losers on the left for the day. Biggest gainer was Broadcom, biggest loser Lululemon up in Vancouver. So the internationals are a bit tough to aggregate into the United States, so I've left those out for now. And we'll really be focusing on the United States as these are United States-based companies. So getting ready to take a look at the sectors and the mega region dashboards a little more closely. During the last video series, I'd created these bookmarks and more realizing that these company headquarters are clustered very closely together throughout the country. And I felt like getting a better understanding of who are the heavy hitters, who are the real industry leaders in these different parts of the country, and are there industry clusters that provide competitive advantage to these companies in these areas. I pretty much know that they are, that they do exist, but defining how to take a look at those is part of the purpose of this series. So let's start off, again, taking a look at the sector dashboards. I tried to make the arrows appear a little brighter on the map. And again, the point here is who are the heavy hitters, who are the leaders in each sector. So I'll blow through energy and utilities pretty quick. Don't worry about what I'm showing here. It's just who's the biggest subsector, and then who's the biggest company in that sector of the index. The whole idea is let's get right to the big shots and see, okay, how are they doing? Where are they? And are these the hubs of an industry cluster within an urban mega region? And there's tons of stuff to define here if you're interested in what I've been working on with my master's research, but really want to get to the valuable items, at least that I've found valuable of these dashboards, which is creating more connections between previously abstract numerical information. Here we're looking at the industrial sector. This helped me out so much to see the subsectors and being able to see where they were located across the country. Materials companies, and looking at how large GE Aerospace was. I hadn't even considered that would be the largest of the industrial companies. And then who's dominant, completely dominant, like Walmart in that sector. So financials, obviously, like I mentioned before, the second biggest sector in the market. And let's see who the biggest ones are there. Berkshire Hathaway, definitely dominant. And we'll see that again when we take a look at the individual regions and the geography. So finally, the largest sector that we have, information technology, And like I mentioned ad nauseum in the previous series, NVIDIA is the giant that dominates that semiconductor subsector. So here's where it gets a little interesting, at least from my perspective, where we're now looking at the sector by company count within the Northeast mega region. Company count is the bar chart down at the bottom. Total market cap breakdown is the pie chart in the bottom right. And then at the top right is the subsector breakdown by market cap, and then the list of companies and their daily percent price change on the left-hand side. So this gives me the ability to really dig into the regions, the breakdown by market capitalization, gives me a handle on very large numbers like $10 trillion being the overall market cap of all the S&P 500 companies in the Northeast. Now that's something I can compare to the overall GDP of the state, for example. So that was the Northeast. I want to introduce these regions one by one since most folks are not familiar with these geographic breakdowns. So here is the Southeast region. Piedmont Atlantic is the name I gave it because you've got the Piedmont region, Atlanta, Charlotte, all those areas, and then the rapidly growing Atlantic coastline. We can see, surprisingly, financials is the most dominant sector in this region because Bank of America is headquartered right there in Charlotte. So that was surprising to me. I thought for sure it would be industrials, and there you have it, financials and consumer discretionary, also a major sector here. And that big slice, specialty retail, who's that? Well, it's Home Depot and Lowe's. So we've got Lowe's north of Charlotte, Home Depot in Atlanta, and then Tractor Supply Co. located south of Nashville. All companies located in the South and familiar to most of us, especially if you own a home. So Greater Florida is the next one. It's probably a little controversial as I grabbed parts of Alabama and threw it into Florida. But as you can see, consumer discretionary, we can boil a lot of the Florida industry down into tourism and move on to the north, where a lot of those tourists are probably coming from, the Great Lakes megaregion. Another surprise. I thought industrials would dominate here. Instead, it's healthcare because of Eli Lilly. They're in Indianapolis. Also, major aerospace and defense presence because of GE Aerospace. That's a company we took a look at in the previous video series. Another potentially controversial region assignment, the Central Riverlands from Minneapolis down to New Orleans. Figured the Mississippi River and that watershed was a good grouping for all of these plain cities. Seemingly similar. Again, surprisingly, financials, dominant sector. Because of Berkshire Hathaway, they're in Omaha. Just shows how the valuations are skewed towards specific sectors. Texas is a very interesting one where, as we covered before, the big energy cluster in Houston, but also we can see there's a tech cluster in Austin with Tesla and Oracle. And Dallas is rather well diversified, having attracted many company headquarters to that city. So the front range I've defined as Colorado down to Albuquerque and El Paso. This one's, and it gets a little challenging with these more sparse areas because they can really be dominated by an outlier like Palantir in Denver. Same thing for the Intermountain West. So let's move on to Cascadia. As I mentioned before, this is broken down between consumer discretionary and information technology with the big Amazon Microsoft divide up there in Seattle. Northern California, no surprise, this is the largest valuation of all the mega regions, even greater than that of the Northeast. Now, it's obviously dominated by those companies, but interestingly enough, the Northeast still owns more assets than the companies in Northern California. So finally, the Southwest, this is Southern California, Las Vegas, and the Arizona Sun Corridor, all rolled into one. And very interesting breakdown here. The tech clusters in Phoenix, the entertainment consumer discretionary clusters up in Vegas, and good mix of healthcare, financials, and other things in Southern California. So zooming in here on Las Vegas, most of the, actually all of the entertainment stocks and companies appear to be down on the day on Friday. And we'll kind of call it here. That's a quick tour of the 11 mega regions. I'm working with different ways to make this kind of entertaining and relaxing and allow you, the audience, to get the most out of these dashboards. Because really they're the most useful when you can interact with them directly. So a lot more to come. Stay tuned. We're going to keep this up as a daily series. Thanks so much for your time.